great slow motion video of a surfer in 4K 120 FPS, right? Well, this is not a video, no. These are 120 photos, yes, photos per second. The Nikon Z6 III is the first ever mirrorless camera with a partially stacked sensor, and therefore you can do super cool things with it, like taking 120 photos per second. I tested this camera in depth and will tell you all about this camera, photography and film, and which other cool tricks you can do with the all-new Nikon Z6 III. Z6? Z6. Z6 III. So what is a partially stacked sensor? First of all, it is a completely new concept and never seen before in a mirrorless camera. If we take a non-stacked sensor, this one would have, for example, a readout speed of 5 out of 10, and a fully stacked sensor would have a readout speed of 10 out of 10. Partially stacked sensors are right in the middle and have a readout speed of about 7 or 8 out of 10. And because it is half stacked, it won't cost as much as a fully stacked sensor, making it appealing for a bigger audience. Unlike the Nikon Z9, the Z6 III does have a mechanical shutter, but this one can only be used up to the H+ continuous burst mode and sounds a bit like a little machine gun.
Say hello to my little friend!
And it's quite cool. This full-frame 24.5 megapixel camera was released in June 2024 and is the successor to the Nikon Z6 II, which also has 24.5 megapixels. The Z6 III comes with some updates, taking big steps into making this the logical choice for semi-professional and professional hybrid users. It is a more advanced model and less suitable for new users. It is a great camera for sports and wildlife photography as it has high burst rates. And it also got some elements from flagship cameras Nikon Z8 and Z9, which I tested and reviewed as well. Furthermore, it boasts the XP7 processor and pre-release to make sure you won't miss that bird taking off.
Mine.
Thanks to the pixel shift mode and full frame sensor, it can be used for landscape and product photography as well. Filmmakers might be happy because of the high resolution, great stabilization, 4K slow motion, internal lock 6K and RAW 12-bit film, and a vari-angle screen. And that means you can use this camera as a vlog camera, as it has a vari-angle screen. I'm using a 24mm lens that has no stabilization, so I'm only using the internal stabilization, and right now I'm holding the camera with two hands and I have no idea where I'm walking. At this moment you can get your hands on a Z6 III for about $2,500. Links in the description. I've been converting all the prices from and to pounds and euros and noticed the USA is the cheapest place to buy this camera. So if you happen to be in the US of A, you'd better buy it there. The Z6 III has some things in common with the retro Nikon Zf, looking at megapixel count and some other features. The Zf is the better looking camera if you like retro, but barely has any grip and therefore is less comfortable to hold for longer periods of time or when you use larger lenses. The Nikon Z6 III is the newer camera and borrows more tech from the big brothers and in general is a better camera than the Zf. But the Zf is more compact and has great power for its price and focuses more on photography rather than being a hybrid camera. The megapixel count is still the same, but the sensor is completely new and is partially stacked. The processor went from X-Speed 6 to 7, and where the Z6 II has eye and animal detection, the third version recognizes up to 9 subject types and has 3D tracking. Stabilization went up from 5 to 8 stops and the maximum native ISO went up from 51,200 to 64,000. The Z6 II uses a tilt screen, where the Z6 III has a 3.2-inch vari-angle screen and now has an insanely bright EVF. And more on that later. The burst rate on the Z6 III went up from 14 to 30, 60 or 120 FPS, and of course you can now film up to 6K 60 FPS RAW, where the Z6 II maxes out at 4K 30 FPS, which is non-RAW. Important differences are the sensor and pixel count. The Z8 sensor is fully stacked and faster, has no mechanical shutter and has 45.7 megapixels. It is a bit bigger and heavier, but also has a faster maximum shutter speed of 1/32,000th. The Z8 has 493 AF points, where the Z6 III has 299, but you get a stop more of low light sensitivity. The Z8 can film 8K 60 FPS RAW, and the Z6 III maxes out at 6K 60 FPS RAW.
That's such a low resolution.
And while the Z8 uses a dual-axis screen, the Z6 III has a vari-angle one. The Z6 III has a fully weather-sealed body and weighs about 760 grams with cards and battery. It has a deep grip, but it is less deep than the one of the Nikon Z9, which I like, so my regular-sized hands are able to reach the FN buttons at the front. The first time I held this camera, I noticed how intuitive the design is, just simple with scroll wheels and buttons for the exposure triangle where you expect and can reach them. And the same counts for the joystick and the AF button. I really love how the orientation of the images and menu changes when you rotate the camera. The same counts for how you use the buttons. This can take a bit of time to get used to, but once you get used to it, it will speed up your workflow. The button placement feels natural. The wheel on the top lets you easily switch between M, A, S and P mode and has 3 user settings as well. On the top right side, you'll find the ISO and light composition buttons next to the video record button. In photo mode, the video record button is set to a quick display cleaner. If you're using the top LCD in the evening, it is possible to light it up with the button next to it. It will only light up the LCD display and not the buttons around it like it does on the Nikon Z9. In my opinion, Nikon cameras are one of the better options if it comes to personalization of buttons, as almost all buttons are customizable, from the 2 FN buttons on the front to most buttons and dials on the back and top. It also has a touch FN option, which you can set via F3 in the menu. As I mentioned before, the Z6 III has a full-sized HDMI port, which aims for more professional use. The mic input, which is placed above the headphone input, can also be used as a line in. Think of preamplified sources coming into the camera, which could be useful during interviews or live events. There's also a built-in accessory terminal, which can be used with the MC-DC2, remote and other accessories. Sounds like AC/DC. This camera has 2 card slots, but for different types of cards. There is one UHS-2 SD card slot, which you can use for most tasks, but if you want to get into ProRes and RAW filming, you'll be needing the CF Express Type B cards, which will fit in the other card slot. All tests in this video were done using the Angelbird AV Pro SE 512GB card, which only costs about $150. It is possible to use the CF Express and SD card at the same time as Overflow, Backup, RAW plus JPEG or JPEG plus JPEG. The battery didn't change much, meaning you can use the ENEL15C from previous cameras on the Z6 III. To give you an idea, a single charge will last you about an afternoon with 120 FPS bursts, 4K 120 FPS and NRAW shooting, meaning that if you have a second battery, you probably will be fine all day long. When it comes to photography, you know that with Nikon you get great color science and natural but slightly contrasted photos right out of camera. They are ready to share, and it is possible to add voice memos and rating, and you could touch up the images in camera. All photos and videos for this test and review were taken with the Nikon Z2470 f4 and 7200 f2.8 lenses. It is nice you have many types of JPEG, HEIF and RAW qualities to choose from, and this makes it easier to adjust the photos to your workflow. For example, for quick sharing of sports photography for a website, you don't need the highest resolution and quality, so JPEG Normal Plus or JPEG Fine might just do. Or if you shoot a wedding, models or an advertisement and you need to share quickly, you'll be shooting 14-bit RAW for editing and might have JPEG Basic or Basic Plus for quick selection sharing with the couple or agency. It is good to know that not all Windows computers can natively show or edit HEIF images, and you might be needing a plugin. This is especially important to know if you will be sharing your images with other people who might not use Apple devices. Now, with 24.4 megapixels, you have a resolution that is fine for most types of photography. It is only you want more megapixels if it's really about the details or when you need to do a lot of cropping or reframing. And don't forget that higher resolutions will get you bigger file sizes, which might change your workflow. This camera is made for continuous shooting, as it can reach up to 120 photos per second in DX mode, meaning a 1.5 times crop, and 60 FPS in full frame FX mode. The buffer can store up to 450 photos when using the 120 FPS mode, or 225 shots when using the 60 FPS mode. And this works with either CF Express or SD UHS those two cards. I went to RIF 010, or RIF 010, how we call it, in Rotterdam, Netherlands, where you can surf in the middle of the city. I was lucky and there were some surfers catching the bigger artificial waves, so enough time for me to test out the burst modes. Whenever I get a new camera, I get way too excited, so I shot an hour of surfing people in 4K 120 FPS film and photo bursts. And selecting single photos from these 120 FPS bursts is quite time consuming. Keep in mind that you'll have a lot of footage when you start using the 120 or even 60 FPS continuous mode. Another tip is to think about if you need RAW plus JPEG when shooting in high burst modes, as it will eat up your card space and it will take you forever to process. Pre-release, which you can find at D3 in the menu, is a great way to make sure you are not missing important moments. Think of a bird taking off or a sports player doing a certain cool action. In order for this function to work well, you have to press the shutter button continuously and of course stay focused and steady. Meanwhile, you're looking at some shots of a seagull that are caught taking off thanks to pre-release. Oh, this cup? Cool design, eh? You can get this cup, shirts and hats from the Camera Deals design shop by clicking somewhere around here. And the design comes in different color combinations as well. If you buy now, you get a discount, a lot of %. The Z6 III is not a megapixel monster like its bigger brothers, but it partly makes up for that as it has a 96 megapixel pixel shift mode. In order for this to work, you need to use a tripod and a non-moving subject like landscapes, statues, a guitar, a wall, or buildings. To set up pixel shift, you navigate to the last item in the photo menu. Here you can set the number of shots, which go up to 32 images, the delay and the interval to the next shot. Photos are not stacked and processed in camera, but you have to do that all yourself using the Nikon NX Studio software. All photos will be taken in RAW, so you can edit them well afterwards. I see myself as an all-round hybrid user. Especially when I test cameras and see a subject appear, I want to be able to quickly take photos and videos. The auto subject detection is therefore very important to me and a reason why I could choose Nikon over other brands, as Nikon is the only brand offering this auto subject select feature. 3D subject tracking made its debut in the Nikon Z9, and the Z6 III also has this function. This allows you to track a subject from left to right and into depth, and it will stick to it. On the Nikon Z9, I found this worked very well, but in all honesty, I had more problems with the Z6 III. When I was shooting the surfers, it would sometimes lose the server, even when there was just one person in the frame. Autofocus and film is working great as well and snaps on quickly to certain subjects. If you find the AF tracking in film too sensitive, you can go to G6 in the menu and change the sensitivity. This is a good idea if you feel like making more cinematic shots when using auto instead of manual focus. The autofocus is still amazing, but has just a little bit less power than the one of the Z8 and Z9. Autofocusing will work until -10 EV if you use f1.2 lenses, meaning autofocus will work late into the evening. This camera is definitely a video camera, and because of the 24.5 megapixels and the partially stacked sensor, it can internally film up to 6K and RAW 12-bit. And you should know it is very special to be able to record internal RAW, as you barely find this in this price range, except for this new Lumix GH7, which I'm reviewing as well, and cost around $2,200. And RAW will take up a lot of storage space, and you will be needing proxies to edit. The good news is the Z6 III makes these automatically for you in camera, so you won't have to do this manually on the computer. It's a time-saving feature it took from the Z8 and Z9. And RAW will give you NAV files you can edit in DaVinci Resolve, but not in Adobe Premiere Pro. I'm a Premiere Pro user, but it's so strange the very expensive Adobe Premiere Pro still doesn't include NAV file support. As DaVinci Resolve is free and basically does the same, I might be switching. But if you want to keep using Premiere Pro, you can always film ProRes RAW 12-bit, as these will be saved as MOVs. Other options are ProRes 422 10-bit, H.265 10 or 8-bit, and H.264 8-bit. Filming 4K up to 60 FPS will give you a 6K oversampled image. But when you shoot 4K 120 FPS, you will have to deal with a DX or APS-C crop, which means a zoom of 1.5 times. This is handy if you needed to punch in anyway, but not great if you actually needed the light you will lose when using the DX crop. The 6 and 5.4K filming are great, but all of these have a 16:9 ratio and cannot film in the 4:3 open gate ratio, and there's no shutter angle control, something the Lumix GH7 can do and does have. Yeah, I know.
The GH7 is a micro four thirds camera and it's not in the same ballpark.
The 5-axis and 8 stops in-camera stabilization comes from the Nikon Zf and is actually better than the ones found in the Nikon Z8 and Z9. It is great for handheld or slower shutter speeds in the evening for both photo and film. And it is possible to base the stabilization on your focus point instead of just the center, and that is great for moving subjects and will result in better stabilization when making film. Though, even with a 24mm lens, handheld, it is not the easiest to get a super static image, and you might need post-stabilization. Personally, I don't mind, but if you don't have too much post-production time, it can be slightly annoying. As with most cameras I test, you can see that the camera is performing perfectly at low ISO levels like 100 all the way up to 3200. You can see this as we go by different ISO settings on the Nikon Z6 III. From ISO 6400 and up, the noise gets more noticeable. I've done my test with both lossless RAW and JPEG Fine Plus. If you ever shoot at high ISO, it is recommendable to always use RAW files, as the computer will have more information to work with and to reduce noise. And noise isn't always bad, as it can add to your creative process. Up to ISO 6400 in JPEG and 12800 in RAW, you will be fine with this camera. The Z6 series finally has a 3.2-inch vari-angle screen, and this shows the Z6 III is leaning more towards hybrid shooters who both film and take photos. It is nice and bright and has a resolution of 2100K dot. The viewfinder has a high resolution of 5760 dots and has 4000 nits in brightness, meaning you can make it very bright. So why would you want that? Well, there might be situations the sun is so strong in your face you normally won't be able to see well. But with 4000 nits, you can make it bright enough to see everything clearly. Another possibility is to shoot with both eyes open and adjust the EVF brightness to your surrounding. It also has a refresh rate of up to 120 FPS, which you will be needing if you want to shoot 120 photos per second. So basically, this is a flagship camera if we look at what you can do with it. You just don't have the pixels a flagship model has. But having that said, you pay less, and you also don't have the 50 MB files that the Nikon Z9 outputs in RAW, and you can see that here, or you can watch the next review here.